Joe Biden's interview Friday with ABC News and his meeting Wednesday with Democratic governors are part of a coordinated effort by his top aides to chart a path forward in the wake of his debate performance, with Axios reporting that a massive political, PR, and personal campaign is underway to reject calls for President Biden to drop his reelection bid and rally Democrats to move on from public debate about his age and future. Let's bring in our panel, Wall Street Journal columnist Dan Henninger and Kim Strassel and editorial board member Kyle Peterson. So, Kim, what do you make of this White House strategy to stop the panic in Democratic ranks? They're going to have him do some interviews. They're going to have him do a presser at the NATO summit next week and making calls to reassure Democrats.
Yeah, it's all intended to squelch out and snuff out any potential rise in groups of Democrats calling on him to get out of the race. And look, initially, Paul, they tried to do a blame game. The president had a cold, and then the president, he was so tired, he'd traveled around the world. They tried to suggest it was the advisors and debate prep that had gone wrong, but that has not really worked. So now this massive outreach, they're trying to pre-butt polls that are going to come out that show that there has been a slide in his standing. They're calling in the big guns, Obama and Clinton, for support. They're calling out the bedwetters, saying that, you know, they shouldn't be so concerned, and a lot of outreach to the president. We'll see, you know, if this stems the tide. I think what the White House is extremely concerned about is that what might start as a few becomes a mass panic. And that is what they are aiming to stop.
Yeah, Dan, suddenly the Democratic press and the mainstream media and some Democratic voices, but the pundit class, for 3.5 years, they told us he's great, sharp as a tack, you know, really nothing to worry about. And if you said anything against it, you were called a mega liar. Now they've all turned. I mean, it's amazing to see. Suddenly reports that Biden has many more incidents of cognitive problems. What do you make of that turn?
Well, it's irresponsible, certainly, on the part of the press, and the public is not going to believe it. He was not sharp as a tack for 3.5 years. I mean, all of this panic is built around this so-called one bad debate. That one bad debate was of a piece with much of what Joe Biden has been doing for months. And the public itself can see him make these gaffes when he's going around the country. Joe Biden, for 3 years, when he has really done significant things like the State of the Union speech, has been reading off a teleprompter, reading words written for him by someone else, or the public frequently sees him sitting there with heads of state who come to visit the White House, and Joe Biden has cards in his lap, which he is reading off. Mm-hmm. His situation is not going to get better over the next 4 months. And all of this so-called strategy of having him do town halls and the rest of it is more likely than not going to produce more incidents, as happened during that debate. I think ultimately, Paul, what's going on here is Joe Biden's call. We can't blame the aides. We can't blame the press. We can't blame the White House staff. Joe Biden and his wife are determined to go forward. Their choice, whatever tragedy may result.
So one argument, Kyle, the White House is making is that Biden is still the only one who could beat Trump. That's less credible. But another argument is that if Biden does get out, it will produce chaos. The party will be a mess. Nobody will know who the nominee is. They'll have an open convention. That will be mayhem. Do you buy that?
Well, there's some truth to that, but chaos may be better than an inevitable loss by a president who is asking to remain in office until he's 86, when most Americans are telling the pollsters they don't think he's capable of doing the job today. But I think the chaos would be less damaging than that Biden push line suggests. If you had an open convention, which is something that political parties did in the lifetimes of people that are alive today, it's not that old, you would have all of the media attention focused on it. You could have debates about which of these Democrats is best to step in for him. Maybe it's Vice President Kamala Harris. Maybe it's not. Maybe you'd have one of these Democratic governors in a swing state or a red state, Andy Beshear in Kentucky, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Maybe you'd get one of them as the nominee, and you'd have a completely different sort of race going into November.
Kim, is Kamala Harris, and I know it's premature right now, but is Kamala Harris the likeliest alternative to Trump? And I know Democrats are talking about it.
Well, I mean, this is a problem. One of the reasons Democrats are worried about ejecting Joe Biden is because it's going to force them to confront another prior mistake, which was turning to identity politics to get a vice presidential person who, by the way, is in most polls less popular than Joe Biden. Yet here's the problem, Paul, is that if Joe Biden gets out and she is suddenly faced with the prospect of stepping up to that, and they decide she's not their best bet and step over her, there is going to be a huge backlash in the party, in particular among minority supporters and also different party officials who would think that that was not fair, as it were. And yet, this is a big choice they're going to have to make, because there are other candidates, a number of whom Kyle just mentioned, would be far better positioned to take on Donald Trump than she would.